Welcome back to the Agweek podcast. I'm Agweek reporter Ariana Schumacher. Today we talk with an expert from South Dakota State University about the growing dairy industry in South Dakota. Just start off by telling me a little bit about the South Dakota dairy industry and how we've seen it grown over the past few years.
So the South Dakota dairy industry has a very huge expansion in the last 10 years. The milk production increased like 60%. In the same time, the numbers of cows increased more or less 33%. So it's in the top 5 states, states that increased milk constantly, year by year, year over year. Yes, with the cows increasing in the last report of USDA this last month, comparing April 2023 to April 2022. So there is an increase of 13,000 cows, only in the second place, only Texas in the first place in the number of cows increase. And with the milk production, again, with 362 millions of pounds, like I said, in the top 5, no? Increasing 8% in the number of pounds in comparison with last year. Yeah, it's a huge expansion of the dairy industry here in South Dakota. Mm-hmm.
And what part of the state are we seeing dairy production growing the most rapidly?
So the I-29 corridor is the area of this expansion, not only for the dairy farms, but the plant processors. Only in this part, in the west side of the river, we only see few small dairy farms. Mm-hmm. So it's the I-29 corridor. That is a great corridor.
And why the I-29 corridor? Why are we seeing more dairies popping up in that location rather than further west into the state?
So the feed availability probably is the first condition, the first advantage in this side of the state. It's efficient to feed cows in this side of the river. And for sure that the processors that are located in this area is another huge advantage. And not only in this area, but when we compare, when we read that the cows are migrating to South Dakota, for example, from California, so it's easy to compare the restriction related to the green taxes, for example. So the groundwater supply is another advantage here in South Dakota. And probably the workforce, the access to the workforce without a problem with for example, the overtime hours, no? That is, the rules there in the West Coast are so strict with these kind of things. Mm-hmm.
And why have we been seeing the dairy industry growing specifically in South Dakota the past 5-10 years?
So more or less that I'm talking before, so the feed cost and availability. So the water, the groundwater access, the rules. So it's so hard to have a permit there in the West Coast, for example. Here is like more suitable for animal production. South Dakota is a state where the agriculture represent the majority of the economy of the state. So, and the workforce, I think that is another good reason. So, but if we can resume and feed, no, the permits, and so the water, the resources.
And when we're talking about the manufacturing and production side of dairy industry in South Dakota, What are we seeing as far as growth of manufacturing and processing here in the state?
So we rely more or less mainly in three processor plants. So Bell Brand in Brookings, uh, in Lake Northern with AgroPure that in 2019 tri triplicate her capacity, and Valley Queen in Milbank that is carrying on an expansion now, 50% increase in the reception of milk. So these are the three most important, and but still in that way, the processor capacities run more or less tied to the growing production. So probably we are going to need more processor coming to the area to support the growing in the milk production.
And you just kind of touched on this, but tell me a little bit about what kind of growth you expect to see as far as processors go. I know you mentioned the expansion at Valley Queen. Talk to me a little bit about that and kind of the need for expanding processing plants across the state.
So when we go around here in the area, I can expect that the number of cows and the milk production are going to continue growing. So probably the growing curve is not going to be going to probably that curve is going to be slow if the processor plant didn't accompany that growing in the milk production. So the number of farms probably are going to go down. So the size of the farm are going to increase, but the number is going to decrease. Probably that huge farms are going to have some impact in the little farms. And the processor, probably we need that another processor plant come to the area to accompany that growing in the milk production, as I said before, because Valley Queen is going to finish the expansion probably next year, but more or less this expansion is covered for the current producers. So we are running tight with the processor plant. So we expect that another processors are coming to the area.
And when we're talking about processing plants in South Dakota, what kind of dairy products are we seeing becoming the most popular, being pushed out of South Dakota?
So mainly all the processors are working with cheese. So the American cheese is the famous reduced fat American cheese style is the the product that is the first probably product that they produce. Remember that probably the huge amount of fluid milk with the population of South Dakota. So we need to move the production for the cheese. But instead of the cheese production, yogurt, ice cream, and probably the collateral products, dry whey and dry fat that is used in another industry, as the candy bars, the formula for milk, the babies formula, and so the supplemental, the feed for athletics and that kind of things. So that are the most common products in these processor plants.
And tell me a little bit about the economic impact that we're seeing coming along with the growing size of the dairy industry across South Dakota.
So for sure that the South Dakota industry represents 1/3 of the economy of the state. So more or less $4.85 billion. are the economic that the dairy industry give to the state. So, and in the directly jobs and indirectly jobs are related with the dairy industry. Like we have 14,700, if I didn't remember bad, job positions in the dairy industry. So, and that is only in the dairy industry. Imagine the agricultural, when we put together all the agricultural sector in South Dakota. Yeah, it's going to continue increase. For that is that the state need to give support to the dairy industry in the different areas as the workforce, for example.
And how do you think that we're going to see the dairy industry continue to evolve? And will we see an increase in the coming years as far as dairies popping up, dairy production across the state?
So, as I said, my thoughts are that the milk production will keep growing with probably an increased number of cows, but for sure that production need to be more sustainable. That means an improved use of the resources. We are seeing as the company of the so the importance of the carbon footprint. So how the digesters, the industry that constructed the digesters in the farms are working hard around in the area. So we are going to see an increase in the profitability of the dairy farms, and the farms going to need to take more control in the carbon footprint. So I can see that. Probably if we think not only in the big farms, as we expect that the average size of the dairy farms increase in the next years, so we have to think in the little farms too. How that number of farms reduce is because the little dairy farms are disappearing, but we can offer them like the completing the chain in the dairy production. So, for example, little farm that has a creamery, so we can go to that road, and why not thinking in more rudiment? How can I say it? A cheese with a special characteristic that the producer can prepare at the farm level. So try to give them, little farmers, options to stay in the dairy industry.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions that I have. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else that you would like to add?
So no, they only repeat that the future of the dairy industry in South Dakota is bright, with the new farms that are very profitable. No, so the future of the South Dakota dairy industry is bright. It's perfect.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Agweek podcast. If you enjoy this content, visit agweek.com/subscribe to support our work. You can also keep up with everything we're working on at Agweek by following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or by subscribing to our email newsletter at agweek.com. And of course, you can always catch our best work in the Agweek magazine or on Agweek TV. And please remember to rate and review whenever you listen.